We do a very similar thing, but through the use of satellites. It's especially relevant today in terms of having a look at that. I'm one of the founders of the company. In terms of my background, I've always been in tech and specifically corporate investments as well. What I'm seeing is telematics for infrastructure playing out in real time.
Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. I'm fascinated with people who are helping build and maintain the physical world around us. On each episode of this podcast, we'll dive in with a risk manager, speak to them about how technology plays a role in this process.
Thank you for joining me on Brick by Brick. I'm excited to have you. I think what ValueSpace is doing is great, but why don't we just get an introduction, your name, your background, and tell me a little bit about ValueSpace.
Thank you for having me. My name is Reijo. I'm one of the founders of the company. In terms of my background, I've always been in tech and specifically corporate investments as well. So corporate VC before I met my co-founder, whom we started ValueSpace with. And we put a product together at the Lloyd's of London Lloyd's lab with risk engineers and underwriters. And that was quite a few years ago now. But the best way to sort of describe what we do is like in automotive insurance, you have telematics installed, right? And so telematics tells you how your fleet operates, if something's going wrong with a truck or with a car in time sequence, right? So we do a very similar thing, but through the use of satellites. So we understand it's like telematics for infrastructure. So we understand if, sort of figuratively speaking, if a light would go on, if an oil light goes on or an engine light goes on, but we can understand that through different layers like movements on a building, commercial property, railways, highways, mining, dams, things of that nature, basically. And if something happens, you get alerted and you also understand the kind of behavior of how the asset's been managed as well over time, because we can look back 10 years when the satellite were launched.
So in essence, it's like all of these data points that a risk manager, for instance, or a team who supports these infrastructure projects or materials or assets, you're like kind of cutting out all the noise and just showing them the insights, right? Because that's what I understand about ValueSpace and kind of the telematics example. It's doing a lot, but it's presenting back what's actually critically important.
Exactly that. So there's two parts of it. Usually we have a look at the preconditions. So things like the geology in terms of there could be fault lines underneath a particular asset as well. So we look at the preconditions first, and then we have a look at the current status as well. We usually use a 3-year time window to understand asset behavior. So especially relevant today in terms of having a look at that. And sometimes we need to go back more like 6 years and have a look at the evolution of that particular risk. And that gives risk engineers and underwriters a really good insight into what has been going on and what the status is of the asset today.
So right now, primarily underwriters are using that data to write policies for these things. Is that right? Or is it you have insured using it to do checks on construction projects? Like where in that space are you guys currently?
Yeah, so there's really two primary use cases. So before you insure anything, you want to understand what the level of risk is. If there's anything you need to have a conversation about with your client and fix anything that needs fixing, or on risk in portfolio assets that you want to have a look at for various reasons. And then again, you have that kind of conversation at the renewal period with the client and see if anything needs fixing.
Great. Let's get into some questions. You were satellite-based structural audits for critical infrastructure. Why is now the right time for this kind of innovation in climate risk management?
Great question. Two things here. So first of all, in terms of extreme weather events, certainly there are more of that around. What we see is that plays a part, but also a lot of the infrastructure is getting pretty old. It's decaying all around the world. So when you put those two things together, it's inflicting much more pressure on weaker structures. And we're seeing all sorts of interesting things around the world where rainfall sometimes is up 100%, down 30% in other regions. The kind of moisture regimes is changing. That's changing the soil dynamics and everything that's on top of that, whether it be commercial buildings, railways, dams, mines, you name it. So that dynamism is fairly recent, I would say. And that's why the kind of old models or the classical models that insurers and risk engineers have been using are not that accurate anymore.
Right. And even if you say, okay, we're going to replace this infrastructure, you might put it in the exact same place, and there might be long-term issues there that you're not catching, or all these things. Because I keep thinking about what's the lifespan of infrastructures these days? Like, is this pushing and making clear the importance of monitoring the health of these critical elements in our environment, right? We always hear about how all of our infrastructure is aging in America, same everywhere else I've gone in the world. Is this allowing those assets, when you do put them in, to have longer lives? Is there, for the businesses that put them in, or for the municipalities, or for whoever's doing the projects, is there a financial reward for taking this seriously right now?
Absolutely, there is. Yeah. So it slightly depends per asset class, but really, in terms of fixing anything sort of before it breaks, is 10 to 100 times more cost efficient. That's just one thing, right? Or one example. However, using this in parallel, so what it gives you the very unique sort of capability is the fact that you can prioritize where you need to actually fix things first. Think of a railway, right? If it's 300 kilometers in length, then on a 100-kilometer section, say, we're saving our client $1.7 million just by using satellite-based.
So you're telling them exactly where to go and do the repair.
Yeah, we're creating like a priority list, and then the engineers
It's
go
so
there.
awesome. I'm very glad that we're taking this concept to the next level. I'm always thinking about in the insurance industry, we're base everything so much on historicals in the past, but we are starting to get analytics that can forecast out with some foresight where things are changing using things like, 14-day cycles, which I know you guys do and other people do in the industry, to understand how much velocity this is changing. All of these things are incredibly important. You're working at the intersection of tech, risk, and regulation, which is not an easy place to work at.
Absolutely.
How do you see regulatory pressure shaping the insurtech landscape in the next 12 to 18 months?
So I think what's been interesting is that the industry in general has had a tough time quantifying these risks. And we've put real figures around it and understand what the facts are today rather than model things, right? So I think like coming back to the kind of satellite applications is you can have a snapshot in facts in terms of, look, this particular, let's say a mine, right? Or a part, it's moved quite a bit, or one of the tailing storage facility walls is moving quite a lot. There's some structural stability issues, for example. You can quantify how much it has moved. Like, for example, that makes it more susceptible to perhaps some of the climatic events like extreme rainfall or whatever is coming through there that can apply extra pressure to that. And that creates a real risk. So I think you can now, we're having the ability now to really audit these types of assets and say, look, the fact that this is degraded quite a lot is actually making you more susceptible to climatic changes. And you can start to quantify that and identify that.
And pre-plan what you need to do over a 5-year strategy or a longer period to resolve those issues.
And we can see that this is new for companies as well. And they're starting to adopt that because you can identify, you can quantify, and then understand what you need to do.
Someone else was talking about, but that I think is interesting is, so you can save the cost reduction because if there's a catastrophe, it's going to be 100x of what it would take to repair it. But on top of that, I think that you also save all of the labor costs that were associated with going out and sending people to the sites and all of this stuff and getting information. I'm not even going to pretend that wasn't useful. I'm glad that that existed, but this is so much more accurate to the long-term viability of your projects.
Exactly.
What are some specific frameworks or policies that have influenced your roadmaps significantly as building technology?
Policies.
Or are you guys helping define what this is looking like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to say that actually. So there's something pretty exciting that we're doing with the UN is looking at how we can enhance safety standards through the use of satellite-borne analytics. And that's something that we look to spearhead now. Well, actually, this year, we're already announced it. So we'll be continuing with that.
Just going back to you guys' origins, when you were in the lab, is this something underwriters were super excited about? They're going to have to adapt to putting this information in all of their models and everything. Has that already happened? Is that already happening?
Yes. If we rewind the clock to the very beginning, there was a dam underwriter actually. And she said, look, this is fantastic. This is something I've never seen before. You can give me an idea and so much information about this asset. And I usually have 10% of this, what you have, in my submission data. So she said, this is amazing. Yeah. And off we went, really. And now, absolutely, I mean, the challenge has somewhat been sometimes to create that process within the company itself, because you have to look at how we're going to use this. Who's going to use it exactly? What budget is it going to come from? That has created some discussions, but we've got over that and it's being integrated.
Yeah, because telematics took 15 years to get into models, right? It was in consumer grade before it was really brought into models for our industry. So it's interesting to see if we've learned lessons from that and are adopting faster for what I think is actually a more important use case, which is the infrastructure of the world is just crazy. Let's talk about material and how material is changing because of this. When you actually build these projects, Is there, paired with the data, is it producing new kinds of engineering to solve these problems? Is there a way to solve the problems with engineering and being smart? Is it about better placement? Like, how are we seeing organizations use this to plot not just the current stuff they have in place, or how's it changing what projects they do?
It's a great question, actually. You can very quickly understand sort of the asset structural risk profile, depending on the asset type as well, right? And then absolutely, you understand everything, say, okay, pretty quickly, or if they need to do further checks on it as well. If it's in a really bad state, then they're going to walk away from it, right? So that's an example of the kind of processes. In terms of the tech or the material side of things that have come about, I don't know. It's really been more about the process itself and integrating it in the slip and the business side of things, more than the materials or tech side of things, I think.
So right now we're still building in a smarter way the same infrastructure we're doing. Where's your technology going? Where is this technology going 10 years from now? Is it ubiquitous in every project? What's the space look like from where you sit today?
Few things that we're seeing. So we're seeing global organizations setting new standards, taking into account satellite-based analytics, right? New safety standards are coming for that, right? So that's one area. However, insurers and brokers are starting to use it as well. Brokers are using it as standard in their processes going forward. What I'm seeing is kind of like, it's like telematics for infrastructure playing out in real time. So imagine automotive insurers going back to the way that we're doing business before telematics were a thing. So I can only see this being more adopted as a standard component in risk engineering and underwriting, actually.
What are some of your guys' biggest challenges right now?
It would be great if some of the processes would move quicker within large companies. I think that has been
Innovator's
something.
dilemma, huh?
Yeah.
It should. Risky or too risky? Relying solely on in-person inspections for aging infrastructure in a flood zone. Risky or too risky?
Too risky.
What about waiting for regulators to mandate ESG reporting before preparing and before engaging with it on your own?
Too risky.
Calling your resilience strategy data-driven while using no satellite data.
Too risky.
Yeah, these are all too risky. I can't say enough of the work that you guys are doing and how important it is to our industry. What's a piece of advice you would give to someone who wants to come in and make an impact in this industry?
Okay, so I think plan for the long game. I think in terms of if you really want to make a change, it's not going to happen in 2-3 months, and prepare for that. I think that's definitely it. The other thing is this industry is a community, and a great one at that. And I think really get to know the community and the risk engineering community, underwriting community, and get out there.
Thank you for the work you do, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us. Head over to trustlayer.io, and then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.